Hey, what's up? It's Wick for Wikimedia Tutorials, and today is going to be the first episode that I'm going to be talking about mixing. So let's start off with the very basics before we're going to be diving into mixing consoles, and just look at the very basics of mixing music. Let's take a quick look at the recording process. When we're recording a song, all the individual instruments get recorded separately onto a track. The very first recordings were all done mono. That means we could only play it back over one speaker, and it was captured with just one microphone. So in order to create a balance between the individual instruments, we had to move the musicians throughout the room. So if someone would have played a solo, they had to step up and walk towards the microphone. Going back to modern times, where most of the people listen to their music over two speakers or over headphones, we're now working towards a stereo mixdown. Even if you're doing electronic music, this is still theory that's gonna apply to you. Let's take a band that we're gonna be recording and mixing. We've got a drum kit, we've got a bass player, we've got two guitar players, we've got a keyboard player, and we've got a small brass section. We're gonna be placing a microphone in front of every instrument. Every microphone is transmitting a mono signal, which is being fed into the mixing console, where we take care of the levels, and that's being sent to tape. Of course, this is now mainly done on a computer, so we're recording it inside the computer, but I'm still going to be using the reference of a tape machine a lot, just for the simplicity of understanding signal flow. So the band played their song, and now we recorded 8 separate tracks of their instruments. Now we're going to start with the mix phase, and we're basically going to be fitting the whole band into 2 speakers. I'm drawing an illustration right here that's going to represent that. We're going to be fitting everything between the left and the right speaker, and we should visualize a 3-dimensional space in between those speakers where we're going to be placing our sounds in. We can move instruments forward and backward by changing the volume, so by fader riding. This is basically moving sounds over the Z-axis. With the pan knob on each channel, we can move them from left and right between our speakers. When we're panning sounds in the middle, it means that they come just as loud out of the left speaker as out of the right speaker. We then talk about panning sounds into the phantom image, because on a stereo mix we don't have any speakers in the center. We can kind of place instruments over the vertical axis with the means of frequency, assuming that the bass is low and the treble is high. That means that we can basically now visualize our whole mix in 3D space. So this illustration makes the concept of placing the sounds into our 3D environment a lot more understandable. Let's take a look at how we can illustrate some mixes. Let's start off with the simple 8-track recording that we've just done. Normally when we're mixing, we're using the audience's view as our perspective. We had 2 guitar players which were standing both sides of the room. So it would be nice to kind of pan the first guitar a little bit to the left and the second one a little bit to the right. This will create a little bit of space in our mix, and it will reflect the way that it was. A good rule of thumb is that we always want bass frequencies to come out of the center. So the kick drum and the bass line will be placed in the center, or the phantom image. The keys were on the left side of the room and the brass section was on the right side, so we're gonna pan that accordingly as well. This is already creating a very rich stereo image. So let's take a look at some styles of mixing that we can apply. Here we can see a very open and defined mix. The gaps in between the instruments can be filled up with a little bit of reverb. This can create like an aura around an instrument. This is something which is really open and defined, so it could suit very well for a jazz mix, for example. This right here is more a commercial type of mix, which we would call the wall of sound. The focus on these type of mixes normally lays on the vocals, which seem to be kind of like in front of the band, or at least in front of the music. So a lot of commercial productions, either it be pop or dance or hip hop or even a pop rock type of song, this type of mixing style is applied a lot. If we're gonna take a look at more underground productions, you can see that the vocals are not that upfront as in these commercial type of mixes. So it could very well be that the mix that you're going for doesn't have to have your vocals really upfront like in a commercial type of product. You should go for the sound that fits your song and the type of production. So when we start off with a mix, it kind of looks like this. You can see that everything is still in the middle, and frequency-wise it's definitely still like a mess. So we're going to start with the volume and the panning and place all the instruments where we want them to be. You can see this already cleans up a lot and makes a lot of things more defined and separated. When there's still too much overlapping frequencies and we need to define something a little bit more, we can then filter off some of the frequencies that we don't need and highlight some of the frequencies that we need to give a little bit of extra sparkle with the use of an equalizer. when the dynamics of certain instruments are fluctuating too much, like for example on the bass or on the snare, and we want to tame those peaks, we can use a compressor to make sure that these stay in balance a little bit better. The next video is going to be an in-depth tutorial about mixing consoles, and we're going to look at the signal flow and a lot of commonly found functions and knobs that we will run into. And after that, we're going to be applying all that stuff onto creating some mixes. And we're going to start off with some 8-track mixes, 16-track mixes, and from there on, we're going to go to 24-track mixes and even a lot higher. I hope you've enjoyed this first tutorial, which was an introduction to the beautiful world of mixing, where so many things are possible once you just know how to. And I'm going to be teaching you a lot of that stuff in the upcoming tutorials. So I hope you've enjoyed it, I hope you've learned something, and I hope to see y'all soon. Peace!